The new year is almost here, so it's likely you have made some sort of New Year's resolution or reflected on an area of your life that you might want to change and develop. Perhaps this is a new goal or a continuation of an old one. Either way, making the conscious decision to improve a particular aspect of your life is an achievement in itself, whether it be regarding physical or mental health, your professional career, or personal relationships. Being able to self-reflect and identify room for positive change implies a type of maturity and awareness about yourself and the world around you. However, it seems as though our personal aspirations fade as the new year eventually picks up momentum and we resume our typical routines and behaviours. And I think it's a shame that we're generally quick to enter and leave this seasonal state of aspiration, as our goals tend to be profound and could serve immeasurable benefits to our lives. So I take the stance that New Year resolutions shouldn't be trivialised when brought into discussion, because this concept captures a momentary desire to self-improve and redevelop, which to me is a rarity within our society. With that being said, if we can understand why New Year goals commonly fail, then we are better equipped to combat this issue and begin taking this concept more seriously. The best way for me currently to do this is by addressing this topic from a psychological perspective, since most of the planning and groundwork for a New Year's goal usually begins within the mind. Interestingly, cognitive behavioural therapies function on the basis that an individual can begin improving themselves once recognising the synchronicity between their thoughts, feelings and behaviours. Now, that's not to say one must need therapy to achieve their New Year goal. However, there is value in extracting certain psychological approaches to then be applied to everyday life. And it should be said that this principle holds meaning all year round and is relevant across almost all life facets. However, I want to pay exclusive attention to New Year resolutions because I believe many of us experience revolutionary moments of self-development during the December period. Perhaps if you're somebody who hasn't felt this way this year, it's likely you have at some point in the past. So I encourage anybody to set themselves some sort of challenge or goal going into the new year, and even more so if this recording is listened to far into next year or beyond. Before continuing with this narration, I would like to mention the formatting of this recording. To appropriately differentiate between the discussed points, this recording has been chaptered. So if you're sick of listening to me talk about something, you can accurately skip to whatever you like. Also, given the nature of the topic area, I think it's fair and productive for me to share one of my own goals going into the new year. So I've made it a goal of mine to be more conscious of my water intake, since I recognise that I probably don't consume enough. This is quite a simple and straightforward goal, which is a good reminder that your goal doesn't need to be complex to improve your livelihood. Nevertheless, I acknowledge some people want big goals that require more work and effort than extra trips to the tap, which is why I'm compelled to briefly break down some psychological processes involved in the general lack in commitment and fulfillment of New Year resolutions. And I want to offer a bit of psychological and perhaps philosophical insight that might help you effectively strategize for a particular goal in mind. Chapter 1. Intimidation of the goal. This first point serves as the foundation to understanding why we might fail our New Year resolutions. And I'll begin by saying that it's alright to think big, and you're entitled to want the best for yourself. But it seems that we eventually become intimidated by the scale of our goals and subsequently adopt a mindset of doubt and continue behaviours that discourage positive change. From what I have seen, a lack in determination to work on our goals is conveyed through expired interest and motivation. It seems that our grand plans for change are quick to pique our interest as we idealise the end result and the various social virtues it may produce. However, these visions effectively become superficial once the morphine-like aspiration fades and the weight of our goal begins to sink in. Although interest and motivation are very relevant points to discuss, a lack in these processes can be understood as overt representations for internal and perhaps suppressed feelings of intimidation towards the challenge of a goal. Despite New Year resolutions being primarily independent self-projects, I think we could benefit from collaborating with one another by articulating our particular goals and intentions. Whether this be with family, friends or colleagues, the notion of destigmatizing self-developmental aspiration might help counter the common feelings of doubt and intimidation. Chapter 2. Evaluation of life factors. Intimidation of our goals may also be a response to the realization of needing to evaluate certain life factors. Depending on your goal in mind, there may be areas of your life that require tweaking in order to begin progressing towards a target. And this isn't always going to be easy because having to evaluate certain life factors are often sensitive in nature and potentially volatile. Perhaps you must consider how elements of your social, financial, or environmental circumstances are inhibiting you from reaching your desired goal. And it's important to be fair and realistic with yourself, because your autonomy over these variables may somewhat be limited, which is understandably intimidating. Having to face this hurdle tends to encourage us to return back to previous routines and habits and unregretfully bury our goals. In the case that evaluating life factors generates an intense intimidated response, we might begin bargaining with ourselves with a narrative to undermine the legitimacy or value of a goal. In the past, I have seen people kind of throw their hands up in the air and say, well, I made it another year, suggesting that whatever habits or behaviours they have been exercising, good or bad, are effective enough from a perspective of survival. Now, this logic is partially sound, however, this kind of self-bargaining is really up to you, and this point neatly demonstrates the duality of individual self-appointed goals, because they are yours to fail and accomplish. Nevertheless, my counter to this logic is the reiteration that our goals should begin small. I will admit that it doesn't help that we live in an era where patience and process has been engineered out of our lives, but that won't change the fact that if you want results, you must invest in the process. Perhaps you have to gradually begin sacrificing certain behaviours to be replaced for others, and remember, this is a yearly goal. Now that's not permission to procrastinate and delay, but rather it's a reminder that gradual progression is key to success. As John Hayward writes, and my dad sometimes says, Rome wasn't built in a day, but they were laying bricks every hour. Chapter 3, Hypothetical Reasoning and Practical Thinking. To efficiently evaluate life factors and adequately control feelings of doubt and intimidation, you should formulate a plan that breathes confidence and guidance into your goal. A great way to start addressing this hurdle and mitigating New Year's intimidation is to take a two-step approach involving hypothetical reasoning and practical thinking. For example, if I am overweight and my goal is to lose a specific amount of weight, I should hypothetically reason with my behaviours related to the goal, such as diet and exercise, which may be, if I consumed less sugar and increased my daily steps, I'll get closer to my weight loss target. This sort of reasoning allows you to identify current behaviours and propose alternative behaviours directly associated with the goal. I think this reasoning is pretty basic on its own and doesn't really need to be discussed in depth, because I believe humans are pretty good at hypothetically challenging their own behaviours, even during the process of acting out unhealthy, detrimental habits. That's why it's important to begin thinking practically in relation to your goal and adjacent to your hypothetical reasoning. For example, if I consumed less sugar and increased my daily steps by buying less processed foods and occasionally walking to the shops instead of drive, I'll get closer to my weight loss target. This thinking introduces legitimate behavioural strategies that reinforce the initial hypothetical reasoning, which essentially functions to cross-analyse behaviour. Moreover, the very premise of practicality is that something is realistic and doable. Therefore, you have to be conscientious, resourceful, and at times creative to achieve this successfully. Without taking this two-step approach, valuable goals such as I want to lose weight can quickly mutate into a hollow slogan rather than a proactive target. So it's vital to begin reasoning with yourself and your behaviours in order to eliminate vagueness and pave a clear, open road towards your goal. Chapter 4, Motivation. So far I've been talking quite broadly because the concept of New Year resolutions tend to be personal and individualist, because no two people are the same, and the challenges we may face in pursuit of our goals are incomparable, even if they are the same. However, I believe we share the common necessity to become disciplined and motivated, which often transforms into our greatest obstacle whilst attempting to achieve our goals. Even if you have successfully evaluated your life circumstances and began practically planning for change, this means very little without the motivation to act and remain consistent. It is at this point that my role as an orator becomes limited, because motivation cannot be prescribed, and nobody can or will believe in you more than yourself. From personal experience, I've learnt that motivation is a skill that must be practiced and programmed into your mind, and I'll admit it's tough. Sometimes it's easy to be content with slacking off or materializing excuses to delude yourself into believing the right action is not paramount. I speak from experience because I do it too. but there is a unique kind of strength in recognizing your susceptibility to favour comfort, because the alternative is quite scary. I reserve a certain amount of fear for those who seem completely indulged in false comforts and convenience, because I know how difficult it is to break that cycle and begin installing productive frameworks in your life. I totally understand that we want to enjoy ourselves with whatever it is that satiates our short-term reward systems, but again, we must invest in the process. And there is a ton of neuroscience specifically related to this topic, which I will reference below. However, on a philosophical note, the greatest threat to our long-term goals is to become satisfied with short-lived pleasures. And this sort of thinking and perception is what fuels my motivation and serves as a hook that quickly reels me back on track if I ever do go astray. Now, I can't imprint my perceptions onto anybody else, but I'm sure you're smart and can find your own ways to become motivated and steadfast in pursuing whatever goals you may have. Though I would say that perceiving the route to your goal as a journey is a great way to differentiate between productive and unproductive behaviours and thoughts. Because no good journey is smooth, and at times the best journeys aren't possible without struggle and setback. But the key is, whenever life sets you back a pace, you should drive yourself forward 3 paces. And that to me is a great characterization of motivation. Just the ability to absorb adversity and use it to propel yourself further and further. Chapter 5. The value of evaluating personality. Returning back to the point of fair and honest evaluations, a useful strategy you can deploy is a self-assessment of your personality and temperament. This variable is a bit deeper and perhaps more abstract than concrete factors such as finance or environment, but a large part of psychotherapy is understanding how certain behavioural responses are determined by prerequisite psychological processes. For example, knowing that you have a tendency to be impulsive when it comes to spending money gives you a better advantage in controlling that behaviour over somebody who is less aware of that impulse. Therefore, identifying a particular personality trait or personality expression that contributes to any adversary behaviours and thoughts to your goal will greatly develop your goal strategy. Because personality is quite personal by definition, there are many generic ways to help identify your own specific personality. Although I could recommend a few online personality psychometric tests for general personality indications, I would strongly advise not using those online results as an exclusive summarization of your personality. Sometimes the best way to understand yourself is to exercise and uncover your own dimensionality, which is best done through seeking discomfort. For instance, if you are naturally extroverted, deciding to take a passive role within a group conversation might shed light on unexercised areas of your social personality and vice versa. Or perhaps if you're in private, you could give yourself various thought experiments that might help you learn more about your own personality and morals through the process of hypothetical challenge. So, if we are able to develop a more holistic understanding of ourselves, the psychological obstacles of our goals become less dangerous and more manageable, meaning issues such as maintaining motivation and discipline are less frequently experienced and pose less threat to the accomplishment of our goals. Chapter 6. Society. I want to conclude by highlighting that our society is flawed when it comes to recognizing and promoting the self-development of its people. Earlier I mentioned that New Year's resolutions are personal and individualist, which prompted me to talk in broader, open terms. Now, it is true that New Year's resolutions are almost entirely individualist. However, there is space to address and advertise this concept across our society. When initially thinking about why we tend to fail New Year resolutions, my thoughts first gravitated towards the plateau in general morale after the Christmas break. And I think it's important to highlight how unique the December festive period is in comparison to the previous months. Because the symbolism of concluding a year and approaching the start of a new traditionally provokes feelings of celebration and self-reflection, as we usually spend the Christmas period with friends and family whilst enjoying hearty foods and exchanging gifts. And even if you don't directly celebrate Christmas, I think it's fair to assume that you are somewhat influenced by the overwhelming festive spirit. Furthermore, corporations operating in our societies strategize and plan on how to capitalize during this month. This could take the form of rebranding products, releasing festive exclusive goods, decorating stores, creating new advertisements, or even decorating the streets. Now, I take no issue with any of this. I think people enjoy this societal festive rebranding, but I take issue with the abrupt return to normality. It seems as though once December is over and January has begun, the festive advertisements disappear, the music stops, and society tells us to get back to work. Again, I don't necessarily take strong issue to this either, because it's vital for our working population to remain consistent for the sake and survival of our society. But I don't understand why we can't knit the idea of self-development into the fabrics of our workplaces and streets. It's strange to me that a world so progressively geared hasn't really bothered attempting to motivate the self-improvement and enlightenment of its population. Now, you can speculate why that might be, but I am not prepared to dwell any deeper into this space. I hope my speech has served its purpose and has resonated with your own experiences surrounding this topic area. Whether you are listening to this before the new year or far into it, the points that have been made will remain relevant. And I think approaching this topic from a psychological perspective boosts the inclusivity of the subject matter, since aspiration, motivation and reasoning are experienced amongst us all and therefore is timeless. On another personal note, I thought the Christmas of 21 couldn't feel any less festive, but this Christmas just set the new record. Maybe it's because I'm getting older and the world hasn't felt the same since I was young. I was born in 2001, making me 21 years of age at the time of this recording, and the future seems somewhat predictable, yet unmeasurably volatile. Nevertheless, be true to yourself and relentlessly find ways to develop. Thank you.